Whether this race has that, I think probably relies on mystical power. Hello and welcome back to another Let's Talk Racing video as we ramp up our previews for the Cheltenham Festival with a day-by-day video. Hope you've been enjoying them. We've had a few different ones, obviously a few viewer questions. We've had my dad on, which was very helpful and very thanks very much to everyone that got involved with that video and said such nice things. I know it meant an awful lot to him, meant a lot to me and Josh as well, that it was so well received. So thank you very much on that. And hopefully you are enjoying these videos. Going into next week, obviously we're going to have the main shebangs, as I like to call them. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the week before the Cheltenham Festival, all the previews of every single race. It will be fascinating. It'll be very interesting. I'm getting excited now. I must confess, at times, I don't know what it's been like for you guys watching, but at times this season I felt like it's kind of just been lingering on a little bit. Like there hasn't been just much to really encapsulate. But in the last couple of weeks, I've really turned a corner. I'm really looking forward to Cheltenham now and all the spring festivals that come with it. And hopefully, we'll find a winner or two in the process. In this video, I'm going to look through the 3 big novice hurdle races and see where they lie and kind of see where I'm really thinking when it comes down to the Supreme on the Tuesday, the Ballymore on the Wednesday, and the Bartlett on the Friday. The Bartlett on the Friday, a tough race to solve. The Supreme and Ballymore, I'm saying that as if they're easy to solve. They're not, but both of them are topped by Ballyburn. Ballyburn has been shortened this week for the Supreme. Now 5 to 6 best price, non-runner, no bet. He's shortened on the exchanges. Tully Hill's at 5 to 1. Firefox 13 to 2. Mystical Power has drifted. He's now 7's best price. Jericho to Repine's 8's. Slade Steel probably not going to run 9. 16's bar. Plenty of non-runners in behind that in the betting. I think an awful lot, as we've said an awful lot of the time throughout this season, does seem to rely on Ballyburn. Does he go Supreme? Does he go Ballymore? I said at the start of the season, actually, around kind of August, September time, I remember me and Josh having a discussion about it. I think it was on one of the earlier videos this season, and I made a case that Ballyburn could be a Supreme horse. That, you know, he's a stout stayer, he likes front-running 2-milers in the Supreme. It's been a tried and tested route. And Josh was very much of the opinion that he'd go for the Ballymore. As the season's gone on, I've kind of constantly warmed to the fact that he'd go to the Ballymore and go against the Supreme, but now it seems that he will be in the Supreme. So I was right, but I have doubted myself along the way, that's for sure, and I unfortunately don't have any fancy docket to prove it, and prove that I got it right back in August time. There's no monetary gain, unfortunately, just pride, and even if that's the case, I'm not sure whether it's too much pride. I think he takes an awful lot of beating, let's be honest with ourselves here. I don't like Tully Hill. He's the one horse that I just don't like for the Supreme. I don't get it, to be honest. I thought he won a race that suited him the last day at Punchestown. I think it's been a little bit of an afterthought in terms of if you'd have told them going into their maiden hurdle over 2 miles 6 that he'd be running in the Supreme. I think they'd have told you were crazy. He then won at Naas where he didn't jump very well. And just the last day, as much as I don't want to obviously, bring the game into disrepute or anything, I always think those races, they don't sit right with me whatsoever. No Flies on him was, I think, 6 to 4, 7 to 4 in the morning. He ends off going off 4 to 1, 9 to 2, and Tully Hill's given 4 lengths out of the gates and is allowed dictate fractions at his own pace. Seemingly nobody in any rush to go anywhere close to him, and then ends up winning impressively, and everyone's in behind. You're looking at Jagoro, he's probably a handicap horse, no Flies on him. Eddie O'Grady then comes out and says he wasn't really fit. I just don't think that form line is as robust as it seems, and therefore I'd like to take him on, especially given his jumping. Firefox is 13 to 2. I think there's an argument to suggest he's probably the right price now. He probably wasn't the right price at 10 or 12 to 1. And I know my dad made a case for him on the video I did with him. He quite likes Firefox. He likes that form that we saw at Fairyhouse earlier in the season, and I can't begrudge that. I've discussed this with Josh a fair bit. Again, something we have discussed on 1 or 2 of the videos. I just wonder with Firefox whether he is actually just a 2.5 miler, but he wasn't right the last day. That being said, people have told me that obviously his 2 bad runs have both come over 2.5 miles, and he's been practically unbeatable at 2 miles so far in his form. So hard to get a real picture on Firefox. Obviously would be something to bear in mind that it's not really a tried and tested route. I think apart from Le Bake, it's been since mid-90s since a horse has finished out of the placings on his previous start before winning the Supreme. So he has to book a few stats. Not that I'm really a stats man, and I do think you can forgive that run. I think he'll run well. But is he going to confirm that form with Ballyburn? I'm not so sure. I wouldn't think he will, if I'm being brutally honest. But hard to know. Mystical Power, I think him and Ballyburn will stay separate. I'll come on to that in the Ballymore. So I don't think he'll run here if Ballyburn's going to run here. And also the fact that Mystical Power and Jericho de Repene, both owned by JP McManus, and Jericho de Repene is definitely going to run here. And he is by far the best English horse coming into this race. There's no getting away from that. He was good in his 2 starts at Newbury. He did it the hard way at Doncaster. I think he was probably better than people give it credit for, in terms of it's good to see a horse having to tough it out. That being said, I do think he is vulnerable in this type of race. I'm just not sure whether the form of that... I know Lump Sum won the Dovecote and Fiercely Proud came second in the Dovecote, but it's all just similar form. Like, they're not actually beating anything different that makes you feel like it's any way better. I know people are going to say that form at Doncaster looks good now, and I'm not suggesting for a second that Lump Sum isn't a good horse. But I was at Sam Thomas's earlier in the season, and he kind of made out that Lump Sum's a really nice horse. But A, we won't see the best of him until he's over a fence. And B, he was like, well, there's not a hope in hell that this horse will run a Supreme. So that's kind of what you're slightly dealing with in terms of... Now, maybe Lump Sum's turned out to be better than he's thought at that stage. That was kind of middle of January, so things can change. But Lump Sum going and winning the Dovecote, as much as that was impressive, I don't think actually tells us a whole pile. I think it just tells us that Jericho de Repene is the best English novice over 2 miles, which I kind of knew anyway, and I think everyone knew anyway. And it's just a matter of fact of, can he actually go and prove that? Can he improve in a Supreme Novices Hurdle? I think he can. I don't think that's up to winning the race. So, as long and convoluted as it is, I think Ballyburn will win the Supreme. The Barring Bingham, I know I was calling it the Ballymore earlier on, of course it's the Barring Bingham Novices Hurdle, is the big feature novice hurdle on the Wednesday. Ballyburn 5-4, best price, a lot of money for Mystical Power in this race at 3-1. Slate Steels 4, Il Atlantique 9-2, Reading Tommy Wrong 7, Gidley Park 11s, Billericay Dicky 12, Predators Gold 12, Handstands 12, 16s bar another load of non-runners in there after that. I'm going to preview this race as if Ballyburn's not going to be in it, because I've put him up for the Supreme in terms of, I think that's where he'll run, I think that's where he'll win. Mystical Power, as a result, becomes favourite. It wouldn't surprise me, obviously, as things would suggest, given the current markets, the Mystical Power will then end up going off Fav for the race on the day, probably more around the 7-4, 2-1 shot. I think he's got a great chance wherever he runs, Mystical Power. A lot of people seem to crib this horse. I don't really know why. I cribbed him going into Galway, I won't lie. I wasn't sure in terms of, he was out at a funny time of the year for a good Mullins horse to win a bumper. And then he was going into that maiden hurdle at Galway, and a few of the horses he was up against had actually, confirmed form of maybe mid to late 120s, early 130s. And he was having to give a few of them a bit of weight. I thought he was going to take a big performance, especially around a course like Galway, which is tricky for a novice hurdler, first time out over hurdles, to give them that and kind of go and win. I thought he would have to have put up a big performance, and he did, and that kind of shocked me. And then just his performance in the Moscow Flyer, again, you can crab who he's beaten. He's beaten Jagoro, he's beaten Lombron, James's Gate. It wasn't a very good Moscow Flyer by any stretch of the imagination, and I know he was slightly behind it at stages, and a bit green and a bit all over the place, but the way he quickened up when Mark Walsh gave him a squeeze was awfully impressive. I think he does have an awful lot going for him here. Il Atlantique is the horse in terms of, I think he's become, not the wise guy horse, but he's become kind of the solid, well, are we kind of dismissing his run in the Lawyers of Naas, where he was pipped by Reed and Tommy Wrong. I would prefer Reed and Tommy Wrong in the Bartlett than I would in the Barring Bingham personally. That's just my own personal opinion. I don't know where they will run. They seem to be 50-50 between the two. He might have a chance in this. I just doubt he'd have the pace. Il Atlantique, my worry with him, I think it's a genuine worry, and I see people saying, to give him credit for that run, he was only pipped on the line. Since he's come to Ireland, he's come off the bridle in 3 races, and he has lost all 3 in relative battles. Now, you could make a case that they're against decent horses. One was Firefox, one was Reading Tommy Wrong, one was Stellar Story. My worry is the times he's won on the bridle, and when he hasn't won, it's because he'd kind of gotten, he's come off the bridle and then ended up kind of losing in a prolonged battle. I know he didn't lie down at Naas, and I'm not for a second kind of really questioning his attitude. I'm just flagging it in comparison to he's going to have to go up the Cheltenham Hill, and is he going to be able to repel a horse, or is he going to be able to get up the hill well enough to win a Bingham? I would have my doubts. Slade Steele's in there in between them. I know Josh very keen on him, and rightly so, given he's put him up at 25s. He's now best price 4-1. If I was in his situation, I'd be giving him the big one as well. So I can't blame Josh for doing that. I've always thought with Slade Steele he's been a very good horse. I think he's susceptible to a very, very good horse. Whether this race has that, I think probably relies on Mystical Power. If he's that top-notcher, I think Slade Steele could be vulnerable. Slade Steele is, for me, the really solid horse. I can't see him being out of the 3. I see him running his race, I see him running well, and he'll stay well, because he stayed well when beating Lecky Watson. He was outpaced over 2 miles. I think this trip will suit, I think the course will suit. He's a pretty good jumper. He's the solid man's option. But he's 4-1. He's a little bit too short for me for the solid man's option, and I do think he is vulnerable to a top classer. Of the others, Gidley Park, I don't know whether they'll end up running here or not. I would prefer to see him maybe run at Aintree. I think he was a little bit at sea when he won at Trials Day. He got it through ability. Predator's Gold disappointed me in the Nathaniel Lacey, having ran well at Christmas time in the 2-mile race. He could come back to form. Couldn't have Billericay Dicky. Handstands is actually not the type of horse I suspect plenty of you were expecting me to like. But he's not a bad horse, this Handstands, I don't believe, by any stretch of the imagination. He won the Sydney Banks last time under a clever and coy ride from Harry Cobden, who probably won the race through the ride. James Bowen probably didn't give Django Bay the best ride in the world. But I think this is an improving horse, and Ben Pauling has a good level of form to go on this year with his horses. He's got a few really nice horses in his yard. Wouldn't surprise me at all, just at the moment, looking at the race, is there one at a bigger price? Handstands at 12-1 would make most appeal for me in that regard. But again, I don't want to be too boring, because Mystical Power is obviously right at the top of the betting, but I think he's the one that could be just a cut above in this race. I think a lot of the rest of them are solid, good Grade 1 horses. I think Mystical Power potentially is the fly in the ointment. I think he could be above them. And finally, it's the Albert Bartlett Novices Hurdle on the Friday. 3-mile, Grade 1 Novice Hurdle, always a grueler. That being said, the last few years it's began to be won by a few more classier types, is how I would describe it. Stay Away Faye, Monkfish, the nice guy, as much as we didn't see him any time after that. He was a good horse. Rather going away from the Martello Tower, Very Wood era, where it was a real grueler. That being said, you do have to stay, you do have to be able to travel, and I think it's just a race. Of all of these, obviously, in comparison to the other races, you've got a 6-1 in the field. It's the kind of race to really hook you in from a betting perspective. I know the others are probably classier races, but this often is a good betting race. Reading Tommy Wrong, who I mentioned in the Bingham betting, he's 6-1 favourite for this race. Dancing City 7-1 High Class Hero 15-2. Now as the hour's been a bit of a springer, he's 10s, Shanna Bob's 10s, Gidley Park is 10s, Captain Teague's 11s, Lecky Watson 12, 16-1 bar them. Reading Tommy Wrong, as I said earlier, I would prefer him in this race. I think he'd have a much bigger chance in this race, as the market would suggest. I think he's a stout stayer. I think he jumps well in the main, and he was really getting going just when it kind of got to the business end at Naas. I think he'd be run off his feet in the Bingham, and he would remind me of when Next Destination ran in the Ballymore as it was then, and he just was off the bridle all the way and ended up plugging on for third, and you were there going, why on earth did he not run in the 3-miler? Dancing City 7-1, he won the Nathaniel Lacey, a horse that plenty of people like for this race. I don't want to pour cold water, because I can see the case for it. It's not a horse that does it for me personally. I didn't like that race. I didn't like the form of it one bit. I thought he beat 2 non-stayers in Predator's Gold and Jatara. I thought it was a bit of a falsely run race. It wasn't a race I would be taking to the well come Cheltenham. I don't know why I say it. It's just a gut instinct. Some of you will have good instincts that are, I must back Dancing City or I must do something. Mine is, I just don't believe that form. I don't know why, I just didn't like it at the time, and I've watched it back a few times to kind of maybe jog my memory and see whether it was better than I thought. I just don't like it. So Dancing City, not one for me, And as a result, Predator's Gold, I don't think Predator's Gold will run the Bartlett. He's 16-1, but he wouldn't be for me either. High Class Hero at 15-2 is intriguing. He's kind of more the old-fashioned Albert Bartlett horse. He's ran plenty of times in the summer. He's got plenty of runs over hurdles in the bag. He's coming to the boil quite nicely. He won the Thurles race that Monkfish won. He hasn't actually perhaps achieved as much as some of the others. Obviously, the two top horses in the market have both won Grade 1s in their last start. As for High Class Hero, has only won a listed race at Limerick, I think is the best. He might have won, a Grade 3. But, he's been dealing with maybe a slightly lesser type of horse in comparison to the other two. But you don't know where the ceiling lies with him in terms of he's an unbeaten horse over hurdles. He's continuously getting better. Now, as the hour has sprung into the market, having won at Haydock in the, I think it's the Prestige Novice Hurdle over 3 miles, Grade 2. Like the horse an awful lot. Hate that race from a perspective of the Albert Bartlett. I hate that weekend. I can't stress it enough. Again, you'll have Ricks in the system. Corrick Rambler did it a few years ago when he ran in the Reynoldstown, and then he won at Cheltenham in the Ultima. But horses that run that weekend at either Ascot or Haydock, it's too close to Cheltenham for my money, especially given how heavy the ground is. And we saw this a number of years ago with Hillcrest in that Prestige Novice Hurdle. He won pulling a cart by a furlong. You thought this thing is the best thing since sliced bread. This horse kind of did pretty much the same. It will have taken more out of him than that will suggest. I can just guarantee it. And therefore, now is the hour, probably not a horse I'll be siding with. He is a horse I do like. I do like him a lot. I think he could be a really nice long-term prospect, but I don't think he's going to be your Albert Bartlett winner. Shanna Bob, not a horse that usually I would be perhaps majorly interested in for this type of race, but it's hard to get over the fact that that form, as much as it may have looked, well, it looked pony at the time, I thought, when he won, I think, at the December meeting at Cheltenham. Looks good now. Moon Duran just come out and won for Fergal. He's now with Fergal instead of John McConnell. I know it was a market raising race, but he has won. And Kerry Hill, more importantly and more impressively, won the River Don next time out by half the track at Doncaster. I thought that was a huge performance by Ruth Jefferson's horse, who will take an awful lot of stopping in the Sefton. I think that's the plan for that horse. So I really hope Kerry Hill is the real deal. This horse beat him 7.5 lengths and looked green and looked still babyish while doing it. Whether he's mentally mature enough to really win an Albert Bartlett this year, that remains to be seen. But this horse is a huge engine, Shanna Bob. I was a bit snippy about him going into Cheltenham, but I was really impressed with what I saw, and he's certainly one to keep on side at 10-1. Captain Teague at 11s. It was a dog rough race, the 2.5 at Christmas time at Newbury. I would think, I think obviously he's 11-1 because Stay Away Faye won the race last year. Nichols has got decent enough kind of view on what will take winning a race of this nature. I can understand that, and this is his pinpointed horse for this pinpointed race. I just wonder how good that form was and how much of a toll that race will actually take on those horses, even throughout the majority of this season. Lookaway looked a shadow of himself in the Betfair Hurdle. I know this horse has a month more to get over it. He's been freshened up since then, which will help, but I don't know. Wouldn't be for me quite at this moment in time. The one that I've ended up, I've obviously backed Croke Park, full transparency, obviously in the Antipo series at 20-1. He's still roughly a 20-1 shot. I think you can get 25s in a place or two at the moment. I think he could run okay. I don't think he's going to be winning the race. The one I've come down on in this race, and I don't know what I'm doing to myself. I really don't. Not a horse that I've liked almost ever. I've been notably snippy about him in the past. But I'm warming to Lecky Watson in this race, and I don't know why I say it. I think his form is a little bit better than people give him credit for. The only issue with Lecky Watson is he's not a winner. I don't think he enjoys winning, even his maiden hurdle at Thurles. As much as he's beating Rushmount, who I think is actually a very fair horse for the Sweeneys, he took his time. He just got up on the line. It was all a bit of an effort. And since then, he's been placed in better races. He was placed behind Slade Steele. He was placed in the Grade 1 Nathaniel Lacey. No, not the Nathaniel Lacey, sorry. The Lord an Ace, behind Reed and Tommy Wrong when he was third. He's a good horse. He doesn't like winning too much, but he ran well in the Cheltenham Bumper last year. He's 12-1. I think if you can get 10, 12-1 on the day when a majority of bookies will go 4 places in the Bartlett on the day, because there'll usually be 15 or so runners. I think he's got a huge chance. Like, I really see him being in the 4. Whether he has the determination and whether he has the actual kind of it in his brain to go through with it and go and win the race, I'm not sure. But if he does, I don't know. Out of all of these, I can just see him running well the most. He's almost guaranteed to be there. I've warmed to him. Not something I thought I was ever going to say this season. I've called him a few horrible names in the past, but Lecky Watson is maybe my one for the Albert Bartlett. So I hope you enjoyed that video looking comprehensively through the 3 novice hurdles at the Cheltenham Festival, the Supreme, the Barring Bingham and the Albert Bartlett. Let me know your thoughts on all 3 races down below in the comments. Is the Albert Bartlett as open as I'm saying? Is the Supreme as closed as I'm saying? I'd love to know your opinions on all matters. If we could get 500 likes on this video, it'd be absolutely immense. And of course, as I've said in a few of the other videos, it would be brilliant if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, trying to push towards 19,000, which will then mean we can push towards 20,000 before the Cheltenham Festival. Hope you're enjoying these videos every day. We'll see you again tomorrow.